عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم ثبتنا عند الموت بلا إله إلا الله. اللهم اجعلنا من الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين يا رب العالمين. We're continuing inshallah today with our lecture series this month, which is on the Four Great Imams. In the first lecture, we covered a bit of an introduction to the madhahib and what is the schools of thought. And we covered the first of the four Imams in terms of time, and that was Imam Abu Hanifa. And then in the second lecture, we learnt about Imam Malik ibn Anas, the scholar of Medina. In this third installment, we are going to look at Imam Ash-Shafi, one of the greatest of the Imams that we know in fiqh and in hadith and in the Arabic language. SubhanAllah, he was such a pioneer in all of these spaces, SubhanAllah. And so today we'll be covering the life of Imam Ash-Shafi'i and who was Imam Ash-Shafi'i and a bit of things about the madhab or the school of thought of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. Now, Imam Ash-Shafi'i, as we can see from here, he was born in the year 204, he passed in the year 204 after Hijri. He was born in the same year that Imam Abu Hanifa had passed away. Imam Ash-Shafi'i was from the lineage or from the family or the extended family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So from his lineage, where he got his name from Ash-Shafi'i, and the father of Ash-Shafi'i, those two were actually Sahaba or companions of the Prophet ﷺ, who embraced Islam. His great-great-grandfather embraced Islam just after the battle of Badr. And then Ash-Shafi'i was the son of his great-great-great-grandfather. Can't remember his name. And Imam Ash-Shafi'i decided to go by that name, by the name of the Sahaba whom from his lineage, and he was from the family of Abdul Manaf, which is where the family of the Prophet ﷺ branches from. So Imam Ash-Shafi'i had some lineage or some tracing back to the family of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. His father had migrated from Mecca, where his tribe was, all the way to Gaza in Palestine, which is where Imam Ash-Shafi'i was born. His full name was Muhammad or Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Idris Ash-Shafi'i. And he was born in Gaza in Palestine. And when he was born at a very young age, his father passed away when his father was traveling and working in Mecca. And so Imam Ash-Shafi'i grew up with his mother, in the care of his mother. And his mother, when he was very, very young, around 2-3 years old, moved from Mecca, from Gaza where he was born, back to Mecca where the rest of his extended family and tribe was living. And Imam Ash-Shafi'i, when he was young, 3, 4, growing up, his mother taught him everything. So his mother would sit at home, even though they didn't have a lot of money, they didn't have a lot of wealth. So his mother took it upon herself to teach Imam Ash-Shafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris. And so she taught him how to read, how to write, and she also taught him the recitation of the Quran. And when Imam Shafi'i was very young, his mother sent him to one of the local schools or one of the local imams so he could study the Quran under that sheikh. And what they would do is, this was at a time where the Quran was recited and the students would sit and they would listen. And so the imam or the sheikh would recite a portion of the Quran. And Imam Shafi'i, he would narrate that he would get to the end of the portion, and by the time he had read it once, that portion, he had memorized it. Such was the memory of Imam Shafi'i. SubhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with such a pure and such an amazing memory that he would read, the Shaykh would read that one passage of Quran and he had memorized it by the time he had finished. SubhanAllah. Imagine listening to the Quran once and memorizing that whole passage. That was Imam Shafi'i. And so his teacher, figuring this out, that Imam Shafi'i had such a great memory, he said, I cannot take money from this student. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped him at a very young age when his mother couldn't afford fees and this for learning the Quran. He didn't have to pay anything because of the courtesy or the generosity of his teacher, knowing that this was not just a normal boy, it was a special boy. He had finished memorizing the Quran at age 7 years old. At 7 years old, he had memorized the Quran cover to cover. Subhanallah. And from this we'll take some lessons from this, is that Imam Ash-Shafi'i was raised by his mother. And he, at a very young age, hafidh of Quran by 7 years old. Amazing memory. And this is where we get one of the main points where we can see through not only Imam Ash-Shafi'i but other scholars as well, is that the mother is the one that creates the Ummah, or creates the future leaders of the Ummah. When we see, even back to the time of the Sahaba, some of the great Sahaba that we know, they were the product of being cared for by their mother. There was one Sahaba, I forget the name, but his mother wanted him to be the leader of an Ummah. And one time a Sahaba said, or someone said to her, may your son become the leader of his tribe. And she said, if he was only to be the leader of his tribe, then he can be killed. To paraphrase, he can be killed if he's only going to be the leader of his people. He's going to be, inshallah, the leader of an ummah. This is from what? The mother. And this is where the mother is the leader of the builder of the ummah. When we have all these great leaders, all these great imams, all these great mashaayikh, we always see behind them is a very supporting mother, whom when they were very young, they will care for them. They will send them to these Quran schools. They would let them learn and send them away for them to learn. At a very young age, imagine Imam Shafi'i, him memorizing the Quran at 7 means that he was sent to Quran classes before that age, memorizing Quran circles. Not with like other young kids, but with adults, where they're memorizing the Quran, not learning how to read. Subhanallah. And this was from the compassion, the efforts of his mother. And so in our own homes, we take this lesson that we need to have in our wives, in our daughters, we want to have someone who is able to develop our kids the way that the pious predecessors were developed. You want to have someone who raises your kids, teaching them all these skills, encouraging them to the seeking of knowledge. Imagine if this great Imam Ash-Shafi'i, he had a great memory, but he used it for business. Then we wouldn't have the great books that we have today. Imagine if he learned reading and writing and only became a teacher of reading and writing. Then we wouldn't have the great things that we have today. The fiqh of Imam Shafi'i wouldn't have existed. But the fact that his mother wanted him to memorize the Quran, learn all this Islamic knowledge. SubhanAllah, we got the great Imam Shafi'i from him being raised by his mother. So that's a very, very important point for you to instill in your own wives, in your own children. If you don't have children or you don't have wives, something to look for. You want to have a wife whom you know will raise your children such that they will have high aspirations for the deen, such that they will help the deen and give victory to the deen. Not someone who you're happy with, just has a job and just has a house and just, prays his 5 daily prayers and that's it. We should have higher aspirations than that. We should want our children to be the best memorizers of Quran. We should want our children to learn all of the fiqh of, everything. We want our children to be the memorizers of hadith. Why do we stop short at, we just want our children to pray 5 times and we're happy with that? No, we should have high aspirations. And that starts with the mother, the one whom is in the home nurturing the children. The tarbiyah starts from the home and it starts with the mother. And so subhanAllah, we see behind great scholars, we see the mother is the one that pushes them towards all of this. And we see that especially in Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i, when he was very young, he was encouraged to travel to Medina to seek knowledge from the great Imam Malik. Imam Malik was alive at the time, or towards the birth and the young life of Imam Shafi'i. Imam Malik was in his old age. So when Imam Shafi'i was growing a bit older, he wanted to travel to seek knowledge from Imam Malik. He was told by one of his teachers, his scholars, that if you want to learn from someone, you learn from Imam Malik. And so he went back and forth with the governor, trying to get a seating with Imam Malik. And before this, he got the book of Imam Malik to prepare for this meeting, and he started memorizing it. And he memorized the whole book. The book of Imam Malik was Al-Muwatta, one of the famous books of hadith. There's 1,700, I think, more than 1,700 hadith in that text, Al-Muwatta. He memorized it in 9 days, and he was only 10 years old. Tabarakallah. You can see, subhanallah, the efforts that Imam Ash-Shafi went through for seeking knowledge. And remember, he hasn't met Imam Malik yet. This is him preparing to meet Imam Malik. SubhanAllah, sometimes we go to a class, it's a Quran class, and we don't have our revision prepared, or we don't have our memorization ready, or we go to a class at university and we haven't done any of the readings, or we haven't watched any of the lectures. And Imam Ash-Shafi, when he was preparing to meet Imam Malik, didn't even read his book. He memorized the whole thing, every hadith in the book, just to prepare for that meeting. So Imam Malik, he was at the door of Imam Malik and he introduced himself, and then Imam Malik said, come back tomorrow and bring with you someone who can recite Al-Muwatta. Imam Ash-Shafi comes the next day by himself and he starts reciting Al-Muwatta. He starts from the first and he starts reading. He had the book in front of him, but it was closed, and he just recited from memory with the book closed in front of him. And he kept going and going and going until he read the entire Al-Muwatta to Imam Malik in the span of about 4 to 5 days. Subhanallah. And so Imam Ash-Shafi, from then until the death of Imam Malik, he studied under the great Imam Malik. And Imam Malik, who was spoken about last week, he was, subhanallah, such a great scholar of Medina. And he was one of the greatest scholars known in that time. Not just in Medina, but in the whole Islamic province. He was known and he was singled out for his amazing knowledge. So much so that people were intimidated by the knowledge that Imam Malik had. That even the governors and the khulafa were scared of, or not scared, but rather they didn't want to approach the doorstep of Imam Malik for fear that he would turn them away. That's how great Imam Malik was. So he studied with Imam Malik until the death of Imam Malik. And then thereafter he studied a bit. At the age of 15 years old, he was given by one of his teachers, he was given an ijazah to give fatawa. He was called a mufti. He was given the permission to give Islamic rulings. SubhanAllah, at such a young age, 15 years old, he was told, you need to start giving rulings. And this wasn't something his teacher said, maybe you can, if you want or if you're not. No, he said, now you have to. Because now Imam Ash-Shafi, subhanAllah, had reached such a level where it would be wrong for him not to start giving rulings to people. SubhanAllah, at 15 years of age. And so around this time, or a bit after this time, he wanted to master the Arabic language. And so what did he do? He took after the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whom at that time it was common for them to send their children out to the Najd, the desert lands of the Arabs, for them to perfect their language and to learn classical Arabic language in its perfect form. So Imam Ash-Shafi'i spent, in one narration, 20 years with a Bedouin tribe, following them around everywhere for 20 years, studying poetry and studying the Arabic language. So much so that when he came back, he had memorized over 10,000 lines of poetry. Subhanallah. Such was Imam Ash-Shafi'i, where he had memorized the books of hadith. He had memorized the Arabic, the poetry and the language of the Arabs. And he was given the permission to give Islamic rulings at such a young age. So subhanAllah, at a young age, Imam Shafi'i was so great in his knowledge. Thereafter, he started teaching and he started encouraging others to start learning and started spreading his knowledge when he was in Mecca and Al-Madinah. Thereafter, one of the governors came up to him, or one of the leaders, and offered him governorship in Yemen, to which he accepted, and he went to Yemen. There, however, he found that he was under a lot of, there was a lot of corruption in that government, and there was 9 or so people whom had plotted against Imam Ash-Shafi'i to get him overthrown or to get him kicked out. So they went to the Khalifa at the time, who was Harun al-Rashid, and said to Harun al-Rashid that they made up some false accusations against Imam Ash-Shafi'i. And so Imam Ash-Shafi'i, when he was called in front of the Khalifa, he was asked to testify, and he started speaking. And it was narrated that Harun al-Rashid, he could tell by the way that Imam Ash-Shafi conducted himself and spoke that he wasn't someone to lie. And so at the end of the hearing or the case against Imam Ash-Shafi'i, the 9 people whom had made false accusations were put to death, and he was left alive. Subhanallah. And it was by the qadr of Allah that in that time, when he was in the capital of the Muslims, the Khulafa at that time was in Iraq, in Baghdad. And so Imam Ash-Shafi'i found himself in Iraq. And there he met the great student of Imam Abu Hanifa, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, one of the greatest scholars of the Hanafi madhab. And so he studied under Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani for quite a while. And then thereafter, going to the end of the life of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, he traveled to Egypt. After studying in Iraq, he traveled to Egypt, where he would write some books, and he would go on to pass away in that time in Egypt. And he said, it was asked, why are you traveling, or why don't you go back to Mecca? And he said, it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was guiding me towards Egypt, as if I was meant to die there. So subhanallah, he went to Egypt and he passed away in Egypt. Now, looking at the madhab of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, we see something that we don't see in the other madhahib. In that Imam Ash-Shafi'i, he was a pioneer or someone who revived fiqh at this time. So if we remember back to this, you have Imam Abu Hanifa, who predominantly studied in Iraq from the students going back to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And then you have Imam Ash-Shafi'i, who studied firstly under Imam Malik, thereafter under Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, who was one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa. And Imam Malik was one of the famous scholars of Medina who learned from Ibn Umar. Now Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar, was known to be one of the Sahaba who tended more towards hadith. And so at this time, there were 2 major different ways of extracting fiqh. One was the Ahlul Hadith, the people of Hadith, whom they would go to Hadith, and if there was nothing found in Hadith, there was no proof that they could use from Hadith, they would go to the people or the people of Mecca and Medina. And what did those people do? And thereafter, what did the Arabs do? And only thereafter they went further on. Whereas Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who was famous for starting the schools in Iraq, he was from another branch of fiqh, which we call Ahlul Ra'i, where he was from the ones that would use opinions, or use the opinions of different scholars. So these 2 scholars, Ahlul Ra'i and Ahlul Hadith, at this time were conflicting, in that Ahlul Ra'i would say, no, we're going to go to this text, then we're going to go to this, and then we're going to use qiyas, and then we're going to use this. So they had a different methodology for coming to conclusions. Imam Ash-Shafi'i first studied under Imam Malik, who was from Ahlul Hadith. So he learned the way of extracting all these fiqh rulings from the Ahlul Hadith, from Abdullah ibn Umar. And then he studied under Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, who was from the school of Ahlul Ra'i, who would use opinions and this and that, and this methodology. So Imam Ash-Shafi'i, when he came and he started writing his books, mainly the 2, and Al-Risala, he combined the teachings of these two schools of thought. And that's why we see Imam Ash-Shafi'i, he has a lot, and these weren't major differences. Of course, there was differences in the 2 schools of thought, but it was more in the methodology rather than the actual rulings. Most of the time, the rulings they came to were very similar, if not differing by bits and pieces here and there. But Imam Ash-Shafi'i combined these 2 and looked at the methodologies within these 2 schools. And so the madhab of Imam Ash-Shafi'i combined both of these, Ahlul Ra'i and Ahlul Hadith. In that, after that, we didn't really have this division anymore. And from his students, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal was actually one of the students of Imam Ash-Shafi'i who learned from his fiqh. And that's where we see, and you'll see next week, that Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, his fiqh follows very closely to that of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. In fact, he takes a lot of his rulings directly from Imam Ash-Shafi'i. And so the madhab of Imam Ash-Shafi, when he was in Iraq, he wrote a few books. And then when he moved to Egypt towards the end of his life, he wrote other texts. And the scholars of the Shafi'i madhab, they will call this the old school when he wrote books in Iraq, and the new school when he wrote his books in Egypt. And there's not big differences between the two. He changed some of his rulings, or he updated some of his rulings in his new school of thought, but there's not many big differences. But the scholars of the Shafi'i madhab will say, this is what the new school of Imam Ash-Shafi'i says about this. That just means when he was towards the later years of his life. Now, before we end, let's talk about some of the qualities or some of the amazing things that differentiate Imam Ash-Shafi'i from the regular scholars of the time. SubhanAllah, Imam Ash-Shafi'i was someone who was known to be a scholar in more than one field, similar to those who came before him, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, and later Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, in that he was a master in Arabic. Master. So much so that some scholars said they had never heard one mistake in his Arabic. Not one haraka mistake in his Arabic. That was how pure his language was. SubhanAllah, some of us, we grow up speaking English or speaking our mother language and we still make mistakes. And it was narrated from him that he didn't make a single mistake in his Arabic. SubhanAllah, from great scholars. Another thing, he was very well versed in fiqh, such that he learned from the Hanafi school and from the Maliki school of thought. And he merged the two together using his wisdom and using his knowledge. Another thing is hadith. He had a very deep knowledge of hadith, memorizing the books that came from Al-Muwatta, from Imam Malik, and from the great scholars of hadith of that time. Insofar that scholars of hadith would come to him asking about hadith. The scholars who were known to be scholars of hadith, not anything else. They weren't known for giving fiqh rulings or knowing Arabic or knowing this or knowing that. They were scholars of hadith. And even then, they would go to Imam Ash-Shafi'i for asking him about these things. And some of them would narrate that he gave us a direction or a perspective that we had never thought of before. And these are the scholars of hadith. And he's telling them, perspectives that they hadn't thought of before. SubhanAllah. Then fiqh, you have people asking Imam Ash-Shafi'i for rulings. And same thing for Arabic, you have linguists who will come to Imam Ash-Shafi'i asking about such and such thing. Imam Ash-Shafi'i was so good in his time management, in that it was said that he would, between the dawn and the midday dhuhr, he would write an entire text. He had that much barakah in his time and so much wisdom that he would sit from dawn up until dhuhr and write out an entire text in that time, subhanallah. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal would make dua for Imam Ash-Shafi'i, his teacher, for around 40 years, praising him and his knowledge, subhanallah. And it's there that we get the saying that Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal said that there is no one who writes a book except that he attributes it or that he in some way has been following that of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. That's how, subhanallah, beneficial Imam Ash-Shafi'i was. In that every book that we have now, in some way, as Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal said, it goes back in some way to Imam Ash-Shafi'i, subhanallah. And following the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he mentioned that for every century there will be someone to revive, a mujaddid, someone to revive the religion. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal said for the second century, it was Imam Ash-Shafi'i, subhanallah. Looking at the worship of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, it was said that, similar to Imam Abu Hanifa, during the nights of Ramadan, it said that he would recite no less than 60 khatmas of the Quran. 60. So in every single night too, subhanallah. That's how much he was encouraged to worship. It said that his nights were 1/3 dedicated for writing, 1/3 dedicated for the salah, for the prayer, and 1/3 dedicated to sleeping. In another thing, he mentions that he never ate to his fill for 26 years or 16 years, one of the two. And he said only once. And when he ate to his fill, he stuck his finger into his mouth and vomited it all up. Because he said having a full stomach hardens the heart and brings someone away from ilm. So subhanAllah, Imam Ash-Shafi'i was so careful with his knowledge and with his seeking of knowledge that he didn't even eat to his fill, such that his heart wouldn't get hard and knowledge wouldn't be taken away from him in that moment. SubhanAllah. We see Imam Ash-Shafi'i in his age, he used to walk around with a walking stick when he was young in age. And people would ask, why are you walking around with a walking stick? You have no physical ailments. And he said, this is to remind me that I'm just a traveler in this world. SubhanAllah, following the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, be in this world like a traveler. So Imam Ash-Shafi'i would hold a walking stick, walking around as if he was a Bedouin walking around to different places. And he was very, very big on him and his students avoiding self-admiration. He was very quick to say to himself that if it was up to him, he would pass this knowledge on without attributing it to himself. He didn't want any of the fame that came with having all this knowledge and having all these students and having people come and ask him and having this governance and this, judgeship. And he wasn't about all of that. Rather, he wanted to be someone simple, and he just wanted to spread the knowledge. And subhanAllah, we see that even during the last years of his life in Egypt, such a great scholar, he would cry and he would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him of his sins. And he said that he fears that he doesn't know whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive his sins and give him Jannah, or will put him into the hellfire for what he has done. Imam Ash-Shafi'i, one of the greatest scholars that we know, and he's fearing hellfire from himself. And then he says, then I remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Ghafur Rahim, that He's the all-forgiving, and that of course He will forgive me and give me Jannah bi-idhnillah. SubhanAllah. So this was Imam Ash-Shafi'i. He was constantly worried about himself. Even though he was such a great scholar, had all this knowledge, taught all these students, he would still be worried about himself. And perhaps that's where we go, and we'll end with some of the famous quotes of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, where he said in one narration of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, where he said that seeking knowledge is more beneficial or is more rewarding than the nawafil, the voluntary salah, the voluntary salawat. That seeking knowledge is more important than that. SubhanAllah, you can see the emphasis that he put on seeking knowledge. And something we can take as well. We want to be people who constantly go and seek Islamic knowledge, whatever it may be, just to increase us and soften our hearts and to expand our horizons. SubhanAllah. So much so that he said, greater than the nafil salah. So if you have, the lecture going on and you have the option of praying the voluntary salah, listen to the lecture, because you don't know what knowledge you're missing out on. He was also famous as saying, he said, going to a dars or going to a lecture without a pen and paper is like going to the mill without flour. It's like going to a mill and not bringing any flour for you to, use it in the mill. And it's the same as going to a lecture without bringing a pen and paper. So at that time, a lot of the scholars at that time, they would come to the lecture and they would try to memorize everything. Or they would try to just listen to the speaker. But no, he said, no, if you come without a pen and paper, what's the point of coming? So subhanAllah, he was very, very strict on that he would bring a pen and paper and write stuff down. And remember, this is Imam Ash-Shafi'i, someone who would just listen once and memorize everything. It was said that his memory was so sharp, he would have to cover one page while he was reading, or he would have to cover the lines after while he was reading, just in case he memorized them and looked at them and memorized them before these. So to make sure he memorized stuff in order, he would cover up one section, just memorize this bit and then go down a bit more, then memorize that and go down a bit, because he was afraid that if he uncovered it and he looked at the other page, he would memorize that page before he would memorize this page. SubhanAllah. And even then he said, no, bring a pen and paper to the lessons, to the lectures. SubhanAllah. And we'll end off with this. One of the things he said that every student of knowledge should have if you want to seek knowledge, he mentioned there's 6 tools. The first one, sharpness, to be alert, to be awake. The second one, eagerness, to be eager, to want to know and learn and internalize all of this. Third, sacrifice. Seeking knowledge doesn't come without sacrifice. SubhanAllah, we see this in Imam Ash-Shafi'i's life more than anyone. Imagine leaving 20 years. You already have an ijazah to give fatawa. You've already memorized the Quran. You've already memorized Al-Muwatta. You can already speak the Arabic language. But he spent 20 years perfecting that because he wanted to be the best in it. He wanted to improve and go above and beyond. SubhanAllah. So he spent 20 years of his life. He could have spent 1 year and said that suffices me. 20 years of his life learning Arabic poetry or learning classical, proper Arabic. SubhanAllah. So sacrifice, number 3. Number 4, a means of wealth. A means of earning money. Whether that be from work or whether that be from teaching. SubhanAllah. And we see this all the way from Imam Abu Hanifa all the way to Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, where all of them required some form of money for their travels. Especially in this time where traveling was something you would do for days at a time. Then you have number 5, companionship of a scholar. In that, it's very dangerous, and we know this even to today, to try to learn stuff without having a scholar to guide you. You know, you just think, oh, I'll just go on YouTube and watch videos and, watch this person and this person. It gets very, very dangerous very fast when you don't know what you're doing in seeking knowledge. And so Imam Ash-Shafi was very quick to advise his students to companionship of a scholar and be very closely attached to them and have them guide you through seeking knowledge. And the last, a long length of time. طول الوقت, long length of time. It's seeking knowledge isn't something that comes overnight, not something that comes over a day or 2 days. Imam Ash-Shafi'i passed away at 54 years of age, and he was learning knowledge literally from the moment that he could talk. SubhanAllah. So imagine 50 years of his life seeking knowledge. SubhanAllah. And even then, he wasn't satisfied. He still wanted to learn more and write more and do more. It was said towards the end of his life, he would still, even though he had so many physical ailments, that's when he would sit on a camel and ride, that his legs would start bleeding and blood would start running down his legs. He would still travel and try to seek knowledge because he knew that his days were numbered and he wanted to make the most of these last hours. So seeking knowledge isn't something that comes easy. And we learn that through the life of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. فجزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.